What's up, Fight Bananas? It is the TST Allies here, back again with another banger. And today we have someone who is the mind behind some of your favorite fight promotions today, man. He is the CEO of Gamebred Bare Knuckle and Gamebred Boxing, as well as Icon FC, and he is the founder and president of Island Fights and this wonderful show that we have. Please welcome Mr. Dean Toole. Dean, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thank you for taking the time out to talk to me.
Anytime.
Hey, so I want to get straight into business because this Friday, March 7th, Island Fights 87, man, out in the Hard Rock Casino in Biloxi, Mississippi, man, all pro boxing and MMA fights. I want to get to the MMA side of things first because when you look at this card from top to bottom, it's one of the strongest Island Fight cards in recent years.
It's it's a good card. I'm pretty selective, so like I think we've had some incredible fight cards. It's difficult when you're not on it's difficult budget wise for these events when you're not on like a UFC fight pass or being paid a license fee, and you're just doing these like for free at the moment on YouTube and stuff. But so the fight cards can be different. It's not going to be like your super top tier matchups because obviously you have to have a budget for that. So this is like a small intimate venue. But we're almost completely sold out. So all the tables are gone. I think we only have like 20 something tickets left total in the entire building. So it's going to be a great night. But yeah, we have Devin Cushing headlining. He's fighting Elio Mosquita, a guy that's fought Shakur Stevenson in the past. Just a gritty vet from Brazil who is going to be it's going to be good to see how Devin does with somebody like Shakur Stevenson fought, get a good gauge of where he's at. Are you doing the same exact things that Shakur Stevenson did to his opponent? It's just a good way to gauge where Devin's at. Same with Saben. Saben Cura's got a very, very, very tough Brazilian veteran in front of him too, Aldemar Silva. So I think after this fight, they'll both eat. I think if they both win, they'll be 15-0 and 16-0, and on their way to some huge stuff we got going on, and should be potentially announcing like a bunch more boxing events, and just for boxing only, not on the pro side, not mixing the two anymore. Island Fights will just be pro MMA moving forward, and then we'll have like a different show for boxing, just strictly boxing. And then but we have a ton of people in the pipeline, guys like Corey Stokes. There's a few other ones that are just slipping my brain, but Saben, Devin, obviously. We have big plans for guys like Tyrone Spong, who are absolute legend in the world. He's making his return to boxing this year. Some huge fights coming up. It's going to be a huge year for Tyrone Spong, not even a step away from the Island Fights thing, but he's about to fight Sam Alvey for the heavyweight title for karate combat. And then June 14th, he's going to be fighting in boxing. So he should have 3 massive boxing fights this year and 2 huge title fights for karate combat. So, but those are the type of guys we'll be having, guys with records like that. Tyrone, I think, is 14-0 or 15-0 in boxing. In boxing also, people just know him as a kickboxer and from MMA, but he's won every belt you can imagine in all of combat sports, Glory, K1, just anything you can imagine. And then and yeah, he'll be making his return to boxing soon. But we'll have a bunch of guys with records like that that'll be fighting on our boxing events coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And we had a short conversation, I think, back in November during the Game Bread event, and you were telling me about that you're kind of building this impressive roster of boxers, and it's kind of almost coming to fruition once everything's officially announced. And it's kind of crazy you talk about Tyrone Sprong because over a decade ago, when he shattered his leg, people didn't know if his career was going to be over or not, and he just rejuvenated himself, in boxing, like you said, being undefeated. Still doing, karate combat. He could be a multi combat champion, in recent history. And since we're getting into boxing, I got to change this graphic because, we're talking boxing. Shout out Boxing Bananas, shout out the professor, shout out Ray, the businessman. But let's talk about the main event, man. You mentioned it, Devin Cushing fighting Elio Mosquita, man. This is a real tough test. And it seems like, since Devin Cushing has come back from his hiatus, his level of competition has been real high. You know, especially last his last fight, his homecoming in Pensacola, that was a very tough fight. You know, talk to me about why it was so important to make sure that we got him on the fast track to becoming a contender.
Number one, he's my nephew. So I've been around Devin since he was 2 years old. So I've been watching him compete since he was 8 years old as an amateur. And unlike a lot of people, like outside of Roy Jones Jr., no one has went further in USA Boxing, the Southern Association. I think he was the Roy Jones Jr. He won the Roy Jones Jr. award. I think he went to. I think he won the Junior Olympics when he was like 13 years old. I forget, but he went the furthest all the way to the Olympic qualifiers. Like, and actually had to fight his way to get there. So he won. He didn't go unopposed. He had to fight and win every single time. He's won several um, like world level tournaments, the Battle of the Universe. He won second place at Ringside World Championships 3 years in a row. These are the best guys in the world. Like the guys that are world champions right now in boxing fought at a world level as an amateur. From Gary Russell Jr. to Gervonta Davis, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney. These are all had the same similar like amateur backgrounds as Devin. I think Devin was 67-7 as an amateur, and he redeemed every loss he ever had, rematched the person and beat him. One of those losses was when he was 8 years old. So it was like whoever threw the most punches won. And then he beat that guy later on in their career. Even the people he lost to at the Ringside World Championships were brought in and he beat them. Those are also 5-day tournaments. So like your legs are completely dead on the 5th day. You had to cut weight, make weight same day, fight, and then not eat anything because you had to make weight again in the morning for 5 days in a row. It's the hardest thing you can imagine. So you don't even get to rehydrate or eat or feast. You have to compete again the next day. And just on the last day, their particular style, they were just always dead. Like Devin's legs were gone. And when he fought those people fresh, it wasn't even a competition. So he has fought the best in the world on the amateur level. And he's in a good position. Guys like Frank Martin, who fought Gervonta Davis 2 fights ago, or one fight, not Lamont Roach, but the fight before that. He got to fight Gervonta Davis at 18-0. He made $3.2 million for that fight and never really made any money before that. So it's that quick, that easy. And we were offered on the Masvidal Diaz fight. Frank Martin was an offered opponent for Devin to fight that night. And then he got a call and got the Gervonta Davis fight. So Frank fell off the card. So it's like that's how close he is to major fights. And then Saben is 2 fights behind him. So our actual goal is to get Devin to 20-0. If he gets some major fight, whether it's a Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Lamont Roach, any of these people, Rolly, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, any of these people are an option or an opportunity that could happen between 17-0 and 20-0. Or we just keep fighting them until we create the opportunities ourselves, and there may become like a vacant title that opens up, and then Devin can fight for his own title and then have his own mandatories that have to fight against him. So either way, he's in a great position. Same with Saben. I think they've done it the right way. And yeah, they took a little bit of time off, but they're in like the perfect age group. They're not even close to being in their prime or peaking or anything. That's going to happen like 32 to 36 years old, somewhere in that range. And they're still in their 20s. So they're all in a very good positions. So excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to Devin a couple times, and his goal has always been world rankings, especially in a division like you said, in lightweight, where it's a very glamour division. Obviously, Tank Davis, moneymaker there. I mean, Shakur Stevenson, big guy. Just a whole bunch of guys, a whole bunch of exciting options at that weight division. Right now, he's currently at, I think, around 139 or 139th rank according to BoxRec in the division. Hopefully he can break into the top 100 by the end of the year. I think the biggest thing he's talked about was getting ranked in that sanctioning body. So what do you think, before we go on to Saben, what do you think we have to do to kind of push that into, fruition?
Well, the thing is, this is the issue with boxing is he could fight somebody right now who's rated in the top 10, right? IBO, WBO, WBA, IBF, WBC, whatever it is, right? He can go fight somebody right now and jump in there. But the thing is, you also want a marketable record, like Gervonta Davis. If he fights somebody tomorrow that's 15-0, like no one's gonna care, unless it's a draw, and now everyone in the world will watch the rematch because they think he was a formidable opponent, right? So right now, like if any of those people fought Devin, nobody would care because Devin's 15-0. If Devin was 20-0, that's a much more marketable record. So as horrible as the boxing business is, where you got to get these guys to these huge records, it's different. In MMA now, you can be 3-0, get on the Dana White Contender Series, win impressively, and you're in the UFC at 4-0. Bo Nickel had one pro fight, got on the Dana White Contender Series, fought twice, and he was in the UFC at 3-0. It's a completely different world. Hamdi Abdel Wahab, same exact thing from Icon. I think he was 3-0, UFC at 4-0. SD Dumas, I think he was 5-0, UFC contract, where your minimums are 12,000 a show, 12,000 a win with $4,000 from Venom. So these guys are making like $28,000 plus their Venom pay, which is actually 4,500. They're making $32,500 for their fourth pro fight. In boxing, you don't get a dollar. You actually pay your own opponent. You pay your own opponent's medicals. You pay your own opponent's travel pay. You pay their hotel room. You pay their purse. You pay everything. Like it's the most expensive, hardest way up ever in the entire world. And a lot. And then when you have to win 15 to 25 fights before anybody even knows you exist, it's a lot can happen in 20 fights. You might have a kid, you might lose your job, you might get in trouble, there's so many different things in life that happens. It's how hard it is. You'd have to fight. It would take you if you fought 4 times a year, it would to get to 16-0 would take you 4 years. Like that's 4 years with none of those other things happening. That's a very long time. And that's if you fought 4 times a year. And there's nobody that we know that's fighting 4 times a year. They might fight twice a year, 3 times a year. They might fight once a year. So just imagine how much longer that prolongs the process. So to get to 16-0 is a lot longer time than people think. And Devin had been pretty active, and I think he turned pro. I don't even know when he turned pro. I forget, but it wasn't 4 years ago. It was probably 8 years ago. So I think he turned pro maybe at 18 or 19 years old. Now he's 27, 28. So just look, he's 15-0. Like, look how long that process takes. So even if you're the most active, it's a very grueling, like, expensive, time-consuming thing. So I think when he came back after his layoff that he took, our thing was, hey, we're only going to fight winning records, either 500 records or better, or winning records. And that's who he fought when he fought in Anaheim. Fought a guy who was 13-1. His only loss was to an Olympian. And was somebody that Devin lost to in the amateurs in nationals. So it was even though Devin was only 17 when they fought, then it was still like a redemption fight, if you would say. So I feel like there's a lot of big things that are going to happen for Devin. I think this on Friday night will be a good chance to show the world, hey, I'm on the same level as these guys, the big name guys, that the only advantage maybe they had is they were signed to a major promoter at one point. And I think that's the only difference. So him and Saben, great positions. And hopefully I can also get them on one of these big cards in June where they can showcase themselves in front of the world also some more.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you talk about it this Friday, a lot of big names on there, a lot of, highly touted prospects. Obviously, Devin's main eventing, but I think the fighter that a lot of people will have their eye on after this event is Saben Cura. Undefeated, I believe 13 or 14-0. One of the slickest footworks I've seen like live in person. Real slick fighter, real likes to pop, pick and pop, fight real well, change levels really well. One thing about him is that he has a huge Filipino demographic as a Filipino, and as a Filipino myself, pretty good. He has a pretty good following. Have you considered, kind of building him as the next Filipino star? Because ever since Manny Pacquiao has retired, there's been Mark Magsayo who tried to did it and he fell off the map. John Riel Casimiro has personal issues that really, hinder him from really taking that mantle. Are you really trying to, kind of push that?
100%. I think that's something that hasn't been done. Saban really just started fighting with us. So I think that was something that really needed to happen. They should be marketing him, and that's what we're going to do. Um, all my friends are Filipino. Like I grew up in, well, I was a Navy brat, but in Pensacola, like everybody that lives here are Filipino. A lot of my best friends are Filipino. So we all know the same people. We're all friends with the same people. We all have my brother's former wife was Filipino. So it's a part of our culture here. And we have several friends, but definitely that's a huge plan is to market him as the next Filipino star. And I think he will be. So I think he has a great fun style for people to watch. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy watching Saben Cura.
Yeah, and his opponent that he has, Aldemar Silva, a guy who also has fought world champions. I mean, he fought Jorge Arce and Juan Manuel Lopez. Those guys in their prime were some of the top guys in their division. So he has another tough test ahead of him. A lot of experience with that. And before we get into the Island Fights 87, I do want to touch on those boxing events that gonna put on later this year. Not a lot of guys, not a lot of people in promotions are putting on straight boxing events. I mean, besides like His Excellency Turkey Al Sheik and maybe like the top promoters, there's not exclusive boxing events, especially in the States. What made you want to kind of, solely, kind of put events on with Sweet Science?
A lot of it had to do with my nephew. So Devin's like a big reason that I'm in the boxing world to begin with. I used to own a gym, and we had a great boxing program there. We had Ezra Sellers, my old boxing coach, former world champion. Smoke Gaynor was also there. Smoke Gaynor actually is cornering Corey Stokes on this card, and which is one of his fighters. So we just have like a great community, great friends with Roy Jones Jr. Used to be partners with Roy Jones. It's just and I think a lot of his fighters will be on those cards as well. So there's a lot of boxing talent in Pensacola and in the Southern Association period, which is our region for USA Boxing. But there's a lot of gyms and there's not a lot of opportunity for anybody. Not in boxing. Boxing's a very brutal, cruel, horrible business that pays nothing. And I'm just trying to change that. I want to be able to provide 6 shows a year where people can compete, maybe with some amateurs on the undercard, and then on the main card have professionals that have say, hey, we can go fight for this promotion and keep our fighters active. And it's something in the middle. If it's in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, or Florida, we can go fight. We can go fight for Dean, and it'll be a consistent boxing show because no one's doing it. There are shows where you have to buy your slots and slot fees and all these different things, and in a few different cities, but those shows are never consistent. They're one-offs, maybe a couple shows a year, 1 a year, 2 a year, 1 year, and then maybe one year. I want to have 6 shows consistently, nonstop, where people know that if they come to our promotion, they can remain active and have a home until they can get some of these really big fights. Kind of the same thing Devin's doing. Devin's got some really, really good paydays so far, and that's not common. Like, it's really not common until you get to 20-0. So I think we'll have a proven plan from some of the people before us, and I think leading the way will be Devin, Tyrone Spong, and Saben Cura.
And that's awesome to hear because, I've always said it, boxing is a sport that is really hard to love because, up until recently with, Riyadh season kind of taking over and kind of bringing everybody together like kumbaya, boxing was very unorganized. Like you would see promoters kind of be very greedy and kind of, matchups not really being made, kind of organizations not really wanting to work with organizations and stuff like that. So it's good to kind of get, some of the best regional guys in our region and just put them under one banner and get them consistent work. So that's awesome to hear, man. And, we talked about the boxing and love doing that. And, I could talk about that all day, but we got to get back into the MMA because obviously Island Fights has a whole bunch. Island Fight 87 has a whole bunch of MMA fights, man. One of them that a lot of top prospects, but one that has caught a lot of attention is Jasmyne Guirola, who was originally supposed to fight, I believe, in January in Island Fights 86. That fight fell through, and now she's making her pro debut against a girl
No,
in
no, this is
Lisa.
this is still an amateur fight for her. So
You didn't hear me, that's right.
she hasn't made her pro debut yet, but Mississippi they'll allow amateurs like on the pro cards. So it's another reason like we love going there, so we don't have to switch up the entire order of the fights. But yes, this is, and she'll fight. I think she'll fight one more or maybe two more times as an amateur, and then turn pro. But yeah, this is still
Okay.
an amateur fight.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna get at. Now I'm just joking, but she's fighting Lisa Melendez, who is I believe she trains out of Jackson Wink, which is obviously a legendary gym.
Mhm.
Why do you think Jasmine's been getting so much attention as this prospect?
Um, well, obviously she's a attractive girl who can fight. That makes her the biggest superstars for female is, do you look good and can you fight better? So she has both those things, looks good and fights good. So in anything, man, woman, whoever, typically that's the case if you're going to be a superstar. So she can fight, and she showed that she's never lost. So she's going to be a superstar, like absolute superstar. She will be the next Ronda Rousey, 1000%, and maybe even bigger than that. She stays in the gym. Her dad, everyone around her says that nobody in the entire universe trains harder than her. All she does is train. I guess she just left her job. She's doing everything in her power. This is all she does. This is her entire life. So when you dedicate something like that, when you dedicate everything and sacrifice everything for your goals, you can't not succeed. So whether you're at Jackson Wink or any gym in the world, like if you're gonna put everything in your life to something, um, which she's doing, she's gonna be very successful. And she can fight, man. She's really good. I don't know too much about her opponent. I know she comes from an incredible gym that has an incredible female program there. Holly Holm, Michelle Watterson, Tally Payne, like everybody's in that gym. Um, I think these are the type of fights she needs. She needs to test herself at the highest level, especially while she still can as an amateur. And it's super hard to get fights for girls, man. Like eventually, girls go to huge gyms and they train with so many other girls that just knocked off 20 people from your potential opponent list because now you train with those people. So it was hard enough to get the girls fights, and now it's 100 times harder. So it's not easy to match the women, especially when they get to 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. It becomes very complicated, but she's on everyone's radar. People at the UFC, people everywhere. So everybody's really, really excited to see her fight, and we're super excited to have her fight for Island Fights.
Yeah, one person that's also been very hard to match up with, he's actually making his pro debut this Friday, is obviously John Gunther, man. A guy that, double champ status as an amateur on Island Fights 170 and 185, I believe. Finally making his pro debut after, I think, what was it, back in October, where his fight got canceled at the last
Mm-hmm.
second. And now he can finally, make that pro debut. What do you think about what can fans expect from John Gunther? When he makes it, when he's in Biloxi.
Fireworks always. I mean, John Gunther is crazy hard to match. Like, you got to think, when it's a professional fight, you're asking someone, hey, are you willing to take a risk on your career against this opponent, whoever it is, whether it's John or Cullen or just anybody, hey, I need you to fight this guy, or would you like to fight this guy? And his opponent accepted, and hats off to him. It's not an easy fight. John was hard to match as an amateur. So now you're going to ask somebody to risk their professional record to fight against them. So not a lot of people lining up to do so. And it gets tricky. But thank God for the Dana White Contender Series, because, if he gets through this fight, on Friday, then he'll probably have two or three more fights, and he'll probably be gone to the contender. It's just all of a timing thing too. So we're in March. I think the contender series is in June, July, August timing, or maybe July, August, September-ish. If he could get that many fights, which I'm not sure, he might make it perfectly for next season. So maybe he'd be probably 6-0 at that point, 6-0, 7-0, and it'll be time for contender next year. So I think he's in a great position. Comes from a great gym. Um, we're excited to watch him, man. 170 champ, 185 champ, and he's got a great opponent in front of him on Friday, Colin Sanders. So excited to see that fight.
For sure. And speaking of the Dana White Contender Series, obviously Cam Teague is fighting on this card as well against, a gamed opponent in David Zellner, a guy who's fought bare knuckles, also fought on island fights. How did that matchup come about?
It was just obviously Cam just fought on the Dana White Contender Series. Typically, whether you win or lose on the Contender Series, if you lose on the Contender Series and you go get a win, you have like a 90% chance you're going to get signed by the UFC pretty quickly. So I think he didn't want to wait. He wanted to stay active. Obviously not fighting some 10-0 guy, because what's the point of doing that when you don't need to do that? But I felt like this was a great fight. David Zellner's tough, man. Like everybody at the PFL, even the higher ups there, know how tough David Zellner is. He's 5-3 or 5-4, but that doesn't give you an example. His last loss was Blake Anthony. Blake Anthony is a stud, absolute superstar on the rise, who will 100% be in the UFC and be successful when he gets there. But he's fought very tough guys. And this is going to be a good test for Cam. We're excited to have Cam back on Island Fights, and excited to have David Zellner fight. But I love that fight. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I talked to Cam, he was just excited about fighting in a ring again. The last time he fought in island fights, it didn't last long. So he wants to get a little bit of ring time,
Yeah.
this time around. But personally, as I'm looking at this card, one fight that really intrigues me is involves Big John Orso, Alabama champion, tough house champion there. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, I think he's a several-time Slugfest winner, um, which is like a very popular tough man competition on the coast, several times. But everybody, Brock Weaver, you name it, has been telling me, you got to get John Orso on Island Fights. You got to get John Orso on Island Fights. And we've been trying, I think, a few different times, but it finally lined up, worked out. And I think he might come out of this on Friday night. All the other people that we're talking about, I think the whole world might be really shocked, and Big John Orso, the native nightmare, might have a ton of more fans after Friday night. So I think everybody's been waiting for him to fight on Island Fights, including myself. I'm talking like years in the making. People have been telling me about John. So I'm excited to watch him fight, and definitely glad to have him for Island Fights. But I think he's going to have a great fan base. Would love to get him in front of all those people in Pensacola at the Base Center. That's where a lot of these guys really become stars on the coast, is when you put them in front of a big old crowd like that, especially when he's beating people the way he's beating them and knocking everybody out. You're on mute, I think.
I just realized that. But yeah, with this Friday, happening in Biloxi, next month, Island Fights 88, that's going to be back in Pensacola. And then I believe you said that there's going to be more Island Fights, coming, I think, back to back to back.
Every month. I think it'll be every month. So, and then we also have our boxing show. So when our boxing show launches, we'll have some months we'll have 2 fights, and that's not even game bred. So we should be announcing something really soon with that as well.
Yeah, and it looks like, you mentioned that you're looking to go down to South Florida. It looks like you're doing the Florida takeover with this. What was the decision into kind of expanding markets?
Well, we had been doing that. So in 2019, before the global pandemic ruined everyone's lives, We were doing island fights in Alabama. We were doing island fights in Georgia. We were doing fights everywhere. We were expanding, and we like to go to markets that other people aren't in those markets. So we're not trying to step on anybody's toes. We actually operate as ethical people in the fight business, unlike a lot of others. So we go to any market we've been at. We've either called the people that have currently did the shows there and asked if they minded, um, or or we go to markets that people aren't currently doing consistent events. Like, if you're doing one show a year, two shows a year, that's different. Like if you're doing a consistent show in a market, we would never ever go to that market. But yeah, we want to really, really expand island fights. I want island fights to have 12 premium events a year. We have 6 to 8 every year in Pensacola, no matter what. We should have at least 4 in Biloxi, and then we'd like to have 4 a year in a few other markets as well. So 12 premium events a year, just Biloxi and Pensacola alone. And I mean, we want to get to the point where we have 36 shows total a year for island fights alone. So if that's, if we were in Orlando per se, not saying we're going to Orlando, just saying we'd like to have 4 a year there, 4 a year in Fort Lauderdale, and 4 a year somewhere else, Georgia, wherever, Columbus, who knows, Savannah, whatever. So we just want to get to the point where island fights is almost every single week, and we have some plans to do that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And with island fights, especially with you who has to kind of you're kind of in control of so many businesses, so many organizations. The right team is important. Delegating, responsibilities is a very important thing. And it seems like, the team for island fights, game bread and all that is a very tight-knit one with, your brother Ryan, Nick,
yeah, so
Levi.
Ryan runs Ryan runs island fights. So yeah, it's uh
Yes.
it's kind of the same crew, but not exactly the same. But yeah, Ryan runs like day to day island fights, everything. So everything's ran through him.
Yeah, and how important was, kind of delegating that responsibility to make sure that, the organization stays strong and stays afloat and stays consistent.
Well, in 20, I forget the year, but when I started with Game Red Bare Knuckle, um, it took a lot of time. So and then when I became CEO of Game Bread Bare Knuckle, there's no way I could do both. So he took that over and is doing incredible. So this event in Biloxi, him and Nick were very Nick Pinto were super like lucrative in making this entire event happen for, in all aspects. So grateful to have those two guys.
Absolutely. And, that's great to hear. And, before I let you go, I want to play a little game with you, Dean. It's a game I usually play with fighters, but it's a little different concept. You're the boss, so I'm going to give a little more a boss game. So this game is called Send Me Location. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 locations, and you tell me if there's a potential of, whether it's an island fights, a boxing event, or a game bread event, kind of going to these locations in the near future.
Okay.
So, first one is going to make it easy. Pensacola.
Always.
All right. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's the home. It's the home of Island
Yeah,
Fight,
we
so I
have like a
understand.
5 year deal at the Bay Center, and we extend that deal every year. So, like, our dates are literally booked out for the next 5 years. So,
Yeah, that is crazy. So the next location is very near to my heart. Talking Orlando.
always love that place. That was probably our greatest, one of the best shows we've ever had. I thought it was the best game bread event we've ever done, and we want to go to Orlando minimum twice a year, and you know, especially at the Kia Center. I absolutely love the venue, love the people that work there, love everybody, and then even all the people in that town, everybody, Mitchell, Ross Kellen, like all the people like that do shows there are involved. Everybody from Fusion, ATT Orlando, is every single person involved. All the UFC vets that started out at like Island Fights, from Phil Rowe, Hannah, Alex Nicholson, Mike Perry, Julian, like everybody involved. Love that market and glad they all supported the show. Mike Davis lives there now too. So like all those people came out. It was like a reunion from all of us that started together in this sport, especially guys like Mitchell, you know, when we were just doing amateur shows and no one really knew anything about us to where everybody is now. So love doing that show. I just absolutely love Orlando. That's number one on my list for any city to go to.
Hey, all I'm saying is, as an Orlando native, the vibes are always there. And there's always, not only the Kia Center, there's just a ton of venues that you could go to where there's a lot of fights happening. Obviously, Caribe Royale,
Yeah,
boxing is very healthy there. You
yeah.
Silver Spurs Arena
We
out in
did that.
Kissimmee.
We did Icon. When Phil Rowe fought at the Orlando Magic Arena, maybe it was 2021 or 2021, I think. We did an Icon event at the Silver Spurs Arena the night before UFC, and all the UFC executives came to our show, and it was awesome, man. We love
Yeah.
Orlando.
That is a great, just a whole bunch of opportunities there and a whole bunch. And, the combat sports scene there is so popular and so healthy that you're guaranteed to draw a major crowd.
Oh, and everybody, it's 45 minutes from Tampa. You're really close to Jacksonville. You're 2.5 hours from Miami. Like you're 6 hours from Pensacola, but everybody came to Orlando. Like everybody. So people from Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, Daytona, wherever, they all came. It was incredible. It was my favorite place to do events, and I loved the Kia Center. Everybody there. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had dealing with a venue.
Absolutely. And, speaking of Tampa, we might as well just hit it real quick. City of Tampa. Could we see an event there anytime soon?
Yeah, I think that would be a great location for any of the promotions that we have. We'd love to do some island fight stuff there. But again, if there's already people currently doing shows consistently, it's something that we wouldn't do. But if it was a bigger show like Game Bread, we would definitely love to go to Tampa.
Absolutely. And, speaking of game bread, one potential opportunity that you've kind of floated with for a while since the last game bread event, talking about Italy.
Yeah, that's definitely in the works. We have a major schedule that we're planning and putting together right now. So once we can do that, we've just taken a little time so we can actually put together the entire schedule for the rest of the year instead of just doing a show and then waiting and doing a show. We kind of thought George was fighting April 12th in Miami, and then obviously the boxing match last year. Under the contract, we couldn't do an event while we were waiting on George to fight, so that prolonged us and delayed us. So I think we have a lot of stuff in the works, but we want to announce an entire schedule for the remainder of the year, and that's what's important to us. But
Yeah,
Italy,
absolutely.
I don't know if Italy would be this year, but it's definitely something in the works.
Well, if it's not this year, I'm going to learn some Italian and start, working on my hand gestures so that way I fit in kind of. One that you haven't talked about, or at least you haven't talked about with me, I kind of want to see your idea about this. How about kind of in the Caribbean?
I've had calls. I've had several calls. There are some things in the works there, but I think it's just for boxing. So
Yeah. I was gonna say because Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, huge boxing scenes over there. There's other Caribbean, countries that I haven't even mentioned, but like I think it would be amazing to have like maybe a boxing event in the Caribbean. So that's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
interesting to
they've
hear.
been doing a couple. Like the people that reached out to me had already been doing a couple. I forget the name of them. Um, I don't know. I'll send you what it is. I forget what it is, but
Okay, cool, cool. And then the last location, we've talked about it. Talking about South Beach, you're talking about Miami.
of course, that was our next show. Like if George fought on April 12th, we were booked April 11th. So we were gonna do a fight night in Miami the night before the UFC, but um, he's not fighting on that card. So we're uh, we're just gonna map out our schedule for the entire year and then announce all the dates.
Was it like contract like issues or something like that? Because he was on Bo Nichols' podcast talking about like, yeah, he was set to go on that time.
Well, I think I don't know. I think it might have been like a time thing, but that was also
Mm.
like before. I think that might have been like November-ish. When I think it was in November when he was on that podcast. That's a long way away from April, So yeah, not sure
Yeah,
exactly what happened, but
yeah, and things obviously change. When it comes to Miami, would you Would it be more of a game bred event, that you would be planning there, or would it be like, island fights? Because game bred, I feel like it could, fill the
Yeah, yeah.
Kaseya
I mean, we would
Center.
do the Kaseya Center. Like if we did an event, we do real arenas for Game Bread. We have a deal with ASM, which is ASM Global. Those are the biggest arenas in the world. T-Mobile, Allegiant, the Honda Center. We did Diaz Masvidal was ASM Arena. Our the Pfizer Forum, the Milwaukee Bucks Arena, ASM Arena, where we did Roy Jones versus Anthony Pettis. The Kia Center is an ASM arena. The Pensacola Bay Center is ASM. ViStar in Jacksonville is ASM. So like those are the arenas we use. And if we do New Orleans, it'll be Smoothie King Center. It'll always be an ASM arena. So,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Island fights would be great too. So really, really just depends.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of options. I learned a lot just in this little segment right here, but that's all the locations I have for our little game called Send Me Location. Shout out Khabib Nurmagomedov for that. But, Dean, before I let you go, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day just to talk with me. But I want to give you the floor. What can fans expect March 7th, Island Fights 87? Where can they watch it? How can they get the remaining tickets that are left, if there is any? And what can fans expect?
Well, the tickets are available at islandfights.com. Very limited. I think we even might have had a table open up. I'd have to check with my brother, but it's like a table on the stage. But yeah, what you can expect, it's professional boxing and MMA on one card, 6 MMA fights, 4 boxing matches, very high level on both sides. Dana White Contender Series vets to future world champions in boxing, people's professional debuts, prospects on the amateur scene that are coming up to pros. I think you'll get a little bit of everything with this show, and it's an awesome, incredible venue. The Hard Rock is amazing. We have after the Hard Rock, we have the whole nightclub upstairs afterwards to ourselves. So we're gonna have our own after party there with everyone from the fights. So it's gonna be an incredible night, uh, and we can't wait to watch the fights.
Yeah, speaking of the after party, I told my girlfriend to pray for me that night, so we'll see what we'll see what happens. But Dean, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to watching the fights on March 7th.
Yeah, thank you, man. Anytime, brother.